Hi, this is John Corkin, Executive Director of the American Rose Society. So glad you joined us on this Saturday afternoon. Before we get started on our wonderful program put on by Don Swanson, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, I've had quite a few people reach out to me along with Anita and Mike Eckley. And so this is about the resources of the webinars. If you want to view those, preparing for your test. If you are a CR candidate, you can go to resources. Then it'll be under CR resources. We do have last year's. We will have these newer ones that you've had that will be posted in the next few hours on that website as well, so you can view those to get prepared for the test. Speaking of the test, Ms. Carol Spears will be sending out your test on the 1st of March. You will not be able to take the test on the 1st of March. It actually opens on March the 2nd. You will have between March 2nd and March 3rd to take that test. You can take it as many times as possible. It is online from Easy Test Maker. You will receive a link on taking that test in your email if you are a CR candidate. Finally, I would like to wish a happy birthday to Miss Anita Eckley for thanking her first and foremost for putting all this together, but today is her birthday and she's spending time here today with us to do the CR program. So let's wish her a happy birthday today. Now, I would like to hand the program off to Miss Diane Summers to talk about a very special offer that we have, our president, Diane Summers.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to the last in our series this month on the Consulting Rosarian School. We have dedicated February to our Consulting Rosarians, so if you haven't taken the time to thank them, please make sure that you do that. They are so critical to our mission of sharing and helping educate all of us on how to grow roses better. I also want to thank all the speakers that we have had this month, as well as Mike and Anita, for all of the hard work to facilitate all of this. And what you see in front of you is an interesting opportunity and just a fabulous opportunity for all of you to receive a wonderful new resource guide called the Rose Atlas. This is close to 400 pages. It is a hardcover book, and it is going to be given to all new ARS members as our gift for joining the American Rose Society. So I know that there are several people on this webinar who are not members of the ARS at this point. You can go out to rose.org and you can join and you will get this wonderful book. If you are a member of the American Rose Society, you will also have an opportunity to receive this book through a donation to the annual fund. And a letter was dropped this week, a very special letter to all of you. And please make sure that you open that when you receive that. This would not be possible without the support and the generous donation of the Beverly Hills Rose Society. And I really want to thank them for being so kind and just a tremendous partner for the American Rose Society and giving us this opportunity. So hopefully you will take advantage of this opportunity, and I know that you're going to enjoy the book. Prior to this presentation, I was talking with Don Swanson, who's our presenter, and he's just received his book, and he thinks it's just an incredible resource, and I know that you all will as well. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Gary, who's going to take us to the next steps in introducing our speakers. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Today we have a wonderful program titled Chemical Safety by Mr. Don Swanson. Once the presentation is complete, we will go into a 30-minute question and answer session. The question and answer process will be different from past seminars. We would like to have as many questions answered as possible within the 30 minutes. If you're a Consulting Rosarian candidate and you have a question during the seminar, please type candidate prior to posting your question. And for example, enter candidate dash what are PPEs. If you're not a candidate, please do not post your question, just simply post your question. I will then ask the presenter your question for you. If you have a question that is not asked within the 30 minutes, you will receive an email response to your question. Also important, if you're watching this seminar with somebody else, please post in the chat box that you're watching with somebody else. And even if you're logged on, so this way we'll have both the names and you'll both get questions, credit for attending the seminar. So we want to make sure that your attendance is noted properly. Anita?
Yes, it is a distinct honor to introduce my mentor, Don Swanson. He's kind of a man for all seasons. What Don did is he began growing his roses when the line to go into any exhibit took 3 hours in Omaha to get in to see the roses. I know because I was with my mom in that line. Aside from his resume, which includes, this is why I wanted to be on the video, it includes this. This is the Handbook for Growing Roses. And this is a behind the scenes kind of thing that Don uses. He does this, he edits it. He has worked with not just this, but the Roses in Review. This single book, the Handbook, I hope I have it right side up most of the time. The Handbook is something that is probably the best kind of membership activity and information activity. But I guess that's not as important. And he's done many things. He served every office. As the kind of human being that he is, Michael and myself showed up in his garden, so he says, without us ever phoning him. I have been with Don, done what Don has wanted us to do. We drive 607 miles to, which is a 9-hour trip, to Omaha a couple of times during the rose growing season as a rule, because Don wants us to. But that is also, he's laughing, that is also because the kind of human that he is, he has been with us at the bedside of a dying friend, also a rose grower. He has answered every question that we have had. All you all shouldn't probably write to him, but he answers mine immediately. He's been newsletter editor. He made my husband and myself, Mike is the other coordinator for the national. Yeah, what? Okay.
Cut it short.
Mike says I have to cut it short. So Don is my mentor. You can read about his activities and his service. And what I wanted to say is he is somebody that, being my mentor, I just love him. And I'm so honored to be here and introduce him. Thank you.
Okay, somebody send me the show my screen link.
Do we get gone?
No, you can't.
Kim,
You're already presenting. I can see your AOL mail, so all you have to do is put up your PowerPoint.
I can't get to it.
Okay, click down on the bottom on PowerPoint, or you can reduce your Microsoft Edge page on your, just hit X at the top right up there, or you can't see it. I can send it to you again. I'll make you the presenter one more time.
All righty.
All right. Actually, I can't because you're already showing your screen. So I actually see your screen. So down at the bottom on your bar, hit PowerPoint.
There isn't any bar. All I've got are the two biggies.
Okay. Well, I will make myself the presenter really quick to make that happen again.
Sorry, folks.
Okay. Here you go. If you go ahead and get your PowerPoint up.
I still don't see my bar. I see your screen.
You should. However, that means that your GoToMeeting is full screen, and so you'll need to reduce it to just a smaller screen temporarily.
Okay. Have we got it now?
I don't know. I will actually send you for the presenter now. Not? Okay. Here we go.
We there?
Now you should see, thank you. It should ask if you want to share your screen. There we go.
Okay. And I will start from the beginning here, folks. I'm sorry for that little hiccup. Okay, I've hidden the webcam for me. I'd like to first off recognize that the basis for my presentation was Bob Martin's chemical and pesticide presentation. Many of the illustrations were put together by Bob. John, it's not advancing. Okay, we there?
Yes, we can see you. We can see you, Don.
Okay, great. I want to point out that I've tried to identify the questions in the test for the CR candidates and indicated them with the red check mark. First off, a quote from Bob on why we use pesticides as rose growers. The purpose of controlling pests and diseases of roses is to protect the blooms and the foliage necessary to support the production of beautiful roses. And I've got to credit Andrew Hearn for the photo of Donna Martin that you see there. Now, so we'll start into the technical stuff, and some of it's going to be repetitive as we go through, and I apologize for it, but we've got to cover all the points. Any product intended to prevent or destroy a pest is considered a pesticide, which makes sense. The EPA evaluates those pesticides and then license them for use. The term pests includes, for us, insects, mites, and fungus diseases that affect roses. Obviously, there's pesticides for rodents and other things as well. Because they're toxic by nature, many pesticides can pose danger to humans, animals, and you should be aware that if you're using an insecticide, you can also affect your beneficial insects. Most pesticides kill the beneficials as well as the targeted pest. Something that comes off a lot of times is folks will say they're organic, they don't want to use chemicals. There are organic pesticides available, but they're not necessarily safer than the inorganic chemical or man-made pesticides. And in some cases, they may actually be more toxic to humans than the man-made pesticides. And this is something we'll talk about throughout the presentation. Read the label. Always read it, and don't forget to read the label. Now, pesticides obviously can enter your body through 4 ways: oral, dermal, inhalation, or through the eyes. Don't eat or smoke while you're spraying. The most common cause of pesticide poisoning is through the skin, and it's especially dangerous when handling in concentrated form because you're dealing with undiluted material. And you'll see on the right-hand side of an illustration that shows the relative entry levels as compared to the forearm. And that's why you're going to wear protective equipment. If you inhale it, you might have a problem, particularly when mixing in enclosed areas. And for our uses, you're spraying outside, so mix it outside. There are some fungicides in particular that can cause permanent eye damage, and that's generally because of the carrier in the concentrated form. Now we're going to talk throughout about personal protective equipment, and you'll see it abbreviated as PPE. And at a minimum, regardless of what's called for on the label, you should wear a long sleeve shirt, long pants, splash resistant goggles, chemical resistant gloves, and that would be an unlined glove if you're using a reusable glove. I use disposable nitrile gloves. Chemical resistant boots, leather shoes can absorb pesticides, so you want to be careful about that. A cap so that any spray above you doesn't come on your head. But then you also need to read the label for any additional PPE equipment. For example, an apron, a rubber apron, may be required when you're mixing or cleaning up or even applying particular pesticides. So you need to read the label. For the environmental protection, don't pour pesticides down drains. On the label, it tells you what the proper disposal of leftovers and used containers is. We'll talk about the leftovers just a bit later. Always keep your pesticides in the original container with the label. Never divide into other containers. In the past, I was reviewing some of our old newsletters for Omaha, and we suggested sharing pesticides. Don't do that. You want to be aware of drift. If there's, be aware of the wind speed, children around you, animals and plantings, and other people. If it's windy, don't spray. Generally, if it's above about 8 miles an hour, I'll spray it another time. If you spill, clean up with kitty litter, sawdust, or some other absorbent material, being sure again to follow the label in disposal. Now, first aid, if you swallow it, inhale it, or get it in your eyes or on the skin. If the person doing that is unconscious, having breathing trouble or convulsions, call 911 and have the container available for the EMTs to review. Follow label directions for first aid. If you need first aid advice, call poison control at the number shown. If you need toxicity information, the National Pesticide Information Center number is shown. That's the NPIC. It's often abbreviated. Now, when you're consulting Rosarian, people are going to ask you for advice on pesticide. What do you spray? When do you spray it? How do you spray it? And so forth. First, always tell them to use caution when handling the pesticide. Again, always read the label. Never make recommendation for uses other than those listed on the label. Never recommend the use of restricted chemicals, and always remind them to wear the proper personal protective equipment. Types of pesticides we're going to talk about are insecticides, fungicides, and acaricides. In addition, there's herbicides that kill weeds, biocides that kill microorganisms, molluscicides that kill snails and slugs. Some of you may have a problem. Nematicides for you folks in Florida that have nematode problems. Ovicides, and that spider mite eggs might be an example of that. Primarily what us Rosarians will be using are the insecticides and fungicides. I very seldom use an insecticide, but I use preventive fungicides on a regular basis. The mode of action is the way the pesticide works. And contact chemicals kill on contact, as its says, systemic insecticides introduce toxins into the rose, which kills the pest when contact is made. Systemic fungicides enter the leaves and prevent the infection, so they're a protectant. The rose is the miniature Abel. More on modes. If it's selective, it kills a few related organisms. Broad, it will kill a range, and remember, it'll also kill non-targeted organisms such as beneficials. Residuals will remain toxic for a time. Fumigants we are outside of our realm as our repellents, but a fumigant is used for fleas, termites, and so forth. Now, repellents, a lot of you may use those. Those will work against deer and rabbits, generally by smell. Some more fungicide terms. Protectants, you spray the fungicides on a regular basis to prevent infection. Propiconazole is an example that's a systemic, gets into the leaves and continues working and prevents the spores from taking hold. Eradicants will help as far as some protection ahead of time, but they'll also be applied after the infection and kill the spores on contact. Manzates and mancozeb are some examples. I use the manzate pentathlon. Multi-site surface protectants are the active ingredient remains on the leaf surface. Single site systemic enters the leaf, translocates through the leaf and upwards, but later new growth is not protected. Only what you have growing there when you spray is protected. Systemic chemicals are, as I said, applied to the foliage as a spray. They can also, in some cases, be applied to the soil around the rose as a drench. For example, a systemic fungicide enters the leaves to prevent infection. The chemical moves typically up through the plant's vascular system. Chemicals stay within the plant, don't wash off, and they're effective for a period of time. For example, propiconazole generally will work for 2 to 3 weeks. The downside, systemics don't enter the bloom and don't move into later new growth. And you see on the little picture, the insects dying as they chew on that systemic insecticide covered leaf. Contact sprays are applied to the foliage, may also be applied to buds and blooms. They remain on the surface of the foliage and blooms. They're not absorbed by the plant. And contact sprays are about the only way to protect the bloom. The downside is the contact sprays wash off in the rain, and again, they'll dissipate over a period of time. The illustration shows how a contact spray can work on an insecticide. Direct spray, when it actually touches the insect while you're spraying. Secondary, they rub on the leaf and get it. They may ingest it or eat it. A repellent will run them away. A fumigant continues to give off and then lure and kill. And that's particularly useful for spider mites when you can use a pheromone to attract the insect to the killing insecticide, acaricide, I should say. Pesticide resistance can develop over time if you use the same spray all the time. Bob pointed out it's akin to using antibiotics in humans, how we're losing the effectiveness because of overuse. Repeated use of the same pesticide allows that target pest to mutate and adapt and become resistant to the pesticide. And actually, the illustration shows you you're targeting, for example, an aphid, and some of them survive after you spray, and those that survive are somewhat immune to the pesticide you used, and they will breed, and pretty soon you have a pest that's no longer susceptible to the pesticide. So you want to use different pesticides, rotate them in and out to prevent the resistance. Each insecticide and fungicide has a specific mode of action in the way it disables and kills its target pest. So you want to rotate or alternate rather those modes of action, which is to say one time use a contact, another time a systemic, and you may want to use different systemics and different contacts as well. You may also on occasion put chemicals with different mode of actions together in a single spraying so that you have a systemic and a contact spray applied at the same time. And I do that on occasion with a fungicide. The formulations of the pesticides are listed on the label. There may be one or more active ingredients. The percentage is given by weight, and both the commercial and chemical name are listed on the label, along with inert ingredients which are added to make more convenient or enhance the effectiveness. And the inert ingredients may also be harmful. For instance, it may be a petroleum product that might be harmful to your eyes and may also be a dermal absorbed through your skin. Again, both the commercial name and the chemical name will be listed on the label. If it's a solution, it's a liquid ready to use. It's in a either in a ready to use format or a concentrated format to be mixed with water. Emulsifiable concentrates or active ingredient with an oil base must be diluted with water and agitated to be sure it mixes before using. You may have aerosols, low concentration fine mist, and that would be a very expensive pesticide to use in most of our gardens. You have wettable powders. Manzate, the pentathlon, is an example. Its active ingredients are mixed with another fine powder as a carrier. You mix it with water and agitate it to get that powder mixed into the water before usage. You'll hear the term LD50. LD50 stands for the lethal dose, oral or dermal, and they're stated separately on the label, necessary to kill 50% of a population of study mammals, those are rats, and that will be expressed in the milligrams per kilogram to kill the target animal. The lower the LD50 rating, the more toxic the chemical. Based on the toxicity chart for chemicals, an LD50 of 0 to 200 will be the most toxic. And we'll give you some examples of those in a moment. Here's a list of some of them. You see the old standby nicotine sulfate that was used in the 30s and 20s has a lethal dose of 50 milligrams per kilogram, extremely lethal. Pyrethrum, 580 to 900. Caffeine, 192 for us coffee drinkers. Salt has a 3,000, so it's extremely non-toxic. Now here are some that a little more common. Copper is at LD50 of 300. Neem oil, which a lot of us use to smother insects, and also have some effect on funguses, has a LD50 of 5,000, so it's extremely non-toxic, or low toxicity, I should say. Now, the signal words on a pesticide label will indicate the toxicity. Danger is a category 1 pesticide, highly toxic. The signal word is danger. That's the most toxic. It can come with a skull and crossbones, meaning it's a poison, and that means without the skull and crossbones, that means the toxicity rating is based on the eye and skin irritation. For example, the picture is Daconil Ultrix, and that can cause irreversible eye damage. So it has a danger signal word on it. Warning is the category 2, moderately toxic. In the example, cyanura 9.7. That's 9.7% of the active ingredient by weight. Is a synthetic pyrethroid insecticide, and it carries a warning label. And it carries that primarily because it's extremely toxic to fish and bees. Insecticidal soap, for example, is considered among the least toxic, but still carries the warning signal word. Category 3 and 4 both are caution labels. They're not usually on the same label. The word caution on a pesticide means the chemical is slightly toxic, category 3, or relatively non-toxic, 4. But the important part is it's caution instead of warning or danger, so it's a whole lot safer for our use. Again, read the label. You'll find the product name, the active ingredients, and the toxicity. You'll find safety information, including personal protective equipment. It may also talk about temperatures, it may talk about wind speeds, and it may talk about the re-entry period when you can allow people to go back into your rose garden. I was in Canada in one of their botanical gardens where they had sprayed sulfur, and they had closed off the garden for 4 hours so that they were sure the sulfur had dried before you re-entered. You'll also see what the applicable crops, plants, pests, and disease that can be used with the pesticide, what the application rates and dilution rates are, the instructions to make it ready to use, what the storage labels are, what the disposal requirements are for leftover pesticide, for pesticide that's left in the container and outdated, and for the container itself when it's empty. You'll see storage if there's special conditions. Generally, it'll say in a dry, not cold, not hot area. For disposal, generally it'll tell you to spray out the diluent. It'll tell you what to do with the old materials, and you can dial the number 1-800-CLEANUP for advice on what to do with old materials. Empty containers will usually call for triple rinsing the container, recycling if allowed, or landfill disposal. Do not reuse empty containers. Dispose of the rinse residual as directed. Again, generally it will tell you to take that rinse water and spray it on the target plant. The target plant we're concerned with are roses. It may say roses, it may say shrubs, it may say flowers, it may say ornamentals. All of those would allow you for use on roses. If it does say shrubs, ornamentals, or roses, you can use it for other pests on the target plant. For example, if you says specifically aphids, but it also says that you can use on shrubs and ornamentals, then you could also use it to spray Japanese beetles. May not be effective, but you can use it. In addition to the label that's affixed to the bottle, you can find that information on material safety data sheets. You can get those from greenbook.net or the OregonState.education, the National Pesticide Information Center, and they have extensive information on all the pesticides if you want to dig deeper into that pesticide. Self-protection, again, we've talked about it, and we're going to talk about it again. Wear unlined rubber or nitro gloves when mixing chemicals and spraying. Wash your hands and face immediately after spraying. Keep the chemicals in the original container with the label attached. Never divide or move to a different container, and wear the required protective clothing. Tools of spraying. I use a compression pump-up spraying. There's also hose end sprayings. Generally, you'd use that for fertilizing your lawn or possibly spraying for sod webworms or something of that nature, where you're using a wide area spray. Your sprayer may also be battery powered or corded. You can also use a small trigger powered sprayer. And I do use a little sprayer like that to miss the blooms. And you should have dedicated measuring spoons and cups to measure your material. And those should be cleaned after each use. Never, ever use them again for food. By a sprayer adequate to your task, I use a 2-gallon pump-up sprayer, and generally I'll have to refill it once. Constant refilling will cost you time. Excess spray material in a large container, a sprayer larger than you need, means that you'll have to dispose of that excess. 1 gallon of spray, according to Bob Martin, would cover 24 full-size leafed-out roses. I should note that's in California. In Nebraska, I can figure on 1 gallon covering about 50 plants, 30 to 50 plants, depending on the size. Misting of buds and blooms for thrips and aphids can be done with a smaller trigger spray bottle. Just be sure you measure the insecticide concentrate correctly so you get the right dilution. Never use more concentrate than the label calls for. In selecting your tools, I need to point out that a gallon of water weighs 8.3 pounds. So if you have a 2-gallon sprayer, you're carrying 16 pounds. If you have a backpack sprayer that is 4 or 5 gallons, you might be carrying 32 or 40 pounds. So you need to be aware of that weight when you're deciding on your tools for spraying. Last week, you heard from Baldo Villegas about his garden of 1,500 roses. And Bob Martin at one time talked to Baldo about that and asked to see Baldo spraying and took a picture of his sprayer. And I'm going to share you Bob's picture at this time. And there's Baldo with his sprayer getting ready to go to work on his roses. So there is some things you need to be aware of each time you spray. Water the day before spraying, and that will come very close to eliminating spray burn on your leaves, as long as you're spraying when the temperature is below 80 degrees or so. Consider the temperature. If you spray in a 90 to 100 degree temperature, you can burn the leaves. Spray early in the day if possible, when the temperatures are cooler. Otherwise, late evening, when again it's cooler. Read the label. Make sure you have on your personal protective ingredient, including rubber or nitrile gloves. Consider the drift. Is it too windy to spray? If it is, put it off. Mix only what you will use, and you can fill the tank half full with water. Add your concentrate, swirl it, and then fill it the rest of the way with water. If you're going to use two different spray materials at the same time, I mentioned manzate and propiconazole, be sure of the compatibility. The label will tell you whether you can mix it with other chemicals or not. Generally, it will only tell you if you cannot use other chemicals with you. And then you can test the compatibility by mixing and seeing if one or the other of them separates out, possibly. I can tell you that manzate and propiconazole can be used together with no settling. While you're spraying, again, be aware of the drift. You don't want to stand downwind and have the spray blow on you. You don't want to use an extremely fine size of droplets for your sprayer. You've got the adjustable nozzle. Adjust that so the droplets don't mist, so they don't blow further than you intend to. Be aware of the distance from the target plant so that you're not standing way away from it. You want to be where it gets to the plant and stays on the plant, not going past it, not stopping short. Be aware of pets, children, neighbors, and discontinue spraying if necessary. If you can't put your dog away, you probably don't want to spray. When you're spraying, start at the bottom of the plant, spray up, and then go from the top down again. You want to be sure you get both the tops and bottoms of the leaves. After spraying, again, I mentioned keep others out of the area until the spray dries. The label may have re-entry instructions. Wash any contaminated surface if you've accidentally sprayed your patio furniture, for example. Clean the sprayer out by spraying out the leftover chemical on the target area, or a lot of them are for lawn and ornamentals, and if that's the case, you can also spray on the lawn. Rinse the container or your sprayer out by filling with water partway, swirl it, spray it out until you've cleaned it out. Dispose of the gloves if they're disposable gloves. If not, wash them. Wash your gloves, glasses and goggles rather. Shower after spraying, being especially sure to wash your hands and face. Wash your clothes separately from other clothing after you spray. Now you've got some choices here, and Baldo talked about integrated pest management last week. That is to select the least toxic method. If you're prepared to accept some damage, you may not need to spray at all. Obviously, exhibitors are more concerned about damage and leaf damage than someone who's just, I shouldn't say just, someone who grows for garden roses as opposed to cut flowers. Use a non-toxic method if you can. Some examples are beneficials, horticulture oils, washing or syringing them off. I use that primarily for aphids and spider mites when I have them. Squishing, there's nothing like squishing a cucumber beetle and getting that little green bug all over you, but knowing that you took that out of your bloom and got rid of it. One of the pests we have the most trouble with is Japanese beetles from July through September. And for those, our non-toxic method is to go out in the garden and scrape them off into a bucket of soapy water and let them drown. Be aware that pesticides may become unstable or ineffective over time, or if you have incorrectly stored them in a hot area or a freezing area. So you want to be aware of that. You may need to dispose of them. In summary, you need to follow those integrated pesticide management steps. Do I need to spray for something? What should I spray? What's the least toxic? Did it work? If it didn't, go back and replan what you're doing. Read the label. Even if you read it last year, read it again. And to make life simple for you, you might mark the dilution rate on the label with, or on the container with a permanent Sharpie marker or something of that nature. For instance, 1 tablespoon per gallon, and then that will stay where you can see it. Always wear the required personal protective equipment. Use the pesticide in the label-directed dilutions and only on a plant listed on the label. If a rose is not listed and it's listed for grapes, don't use it. If it's listed for roses but not grapes, don't use it on grapes. Always use the least toxic product. I'm going to go now and show you Bob and Donna Martin's lovely garden in Escondido, California. Unfortunately, this may be your last view of it, except in other slides. Unfortunately, as you know, Bob passed away and Donna has now relocated from Escondido, but this is a fond memory for most of us. Before I go to the questions, I want to be sure and thank those. I want to thank the ARS staff members who set up the program, Mike and Anita Eckley, the National CR chairs, for putting together this series of classes, and those who are answering the questions online by chat are Pam Smith, Andy Black, and Ken Schmidt, and Satish Prabhu is at hand to answer questions if I get stumped. So with that, what questions do you have? Gary, you want to take over for that?
Well, thank you, Don, for a wonderful presentation. We'll now go into a 30-minute Q&A session. Remember, if you're a CR candidate, to post candidate prior to asking your questions. Let's see what we have. All right, James Schultz wants to ask about the sensitivity, light sensitivity of pesticides.
You do not want to store them in a brightly lit area, sunlit area, and it will tell you that on the label generally, and most pesticide containers are amber or non-transparent materials for that very purpose. As far as sensitivity in the garden, that's part of the reason you need to spray on a regular basis, contact sprays, systemics. The sunlight will, over time, break down that protection. as will rain and wind and other environmental factors of that nature.
Yeah, it looks like we have Andy responded to many of the questions that have come up.
Attaboy, Andy.
All right, so Holly Hagg wants to know, can certain organic fertilizers also help repel insects? And if so, what would those be? I'm wondering about worm casings.
No, they won't. They may repel rabbits or deer or something of that nature, but as far as insects or fungus, no, not unless it specifically has a systemic property in it, and that's not the case with worm casings to my knowledge. Satish, do you have any insight on that?
I agree with you. No, they don't do anything for the insects and pests.
Thank you.
All right. Tony wants to ask, is it more effective to mix the two fungicides, manicozane and propaquine, or to alternate spraying them?
I would generally alternate. They do have different mode of action, and again, you don't want to build up insecticide or fungicide resistance. So alternation of mode of action, and then you also may want to bring in other materials. So you may want to be using 2 contact materials and 2 systemics and rotate through those on a basis to avoid the resistance buildup. One is not going to add to the effectiveness of the other. It just gives a different mode of action. If you already have black spot, the systemic materials will stop new infections, but the spores that are already there can do some damage, which is why you want to use something such as manzate to kill the spores.
So Juliana wants to know what progress is being made to combat black spot genetically.
Quite a bit of research is going on in that, and there's a lot of success in that area. The knockout roses seldom get them. David Zlezak up at the University of Wisconsin Fall Rivers, I believe is where he's doing his work, is doing series of roses. Mian in France is doing resistant breeding for black spot. It's a matter of selecting your roses. They're out there that are resistant to black spot. Again, you have to decide if you're willing to put up with a little black spot and spraying requirement to get that lovely exhibition bloom that looks like a florist bloom, or if you prefer to have in your garden shrubs that are resistant to black spot but don't have the form you might get from a hybrid tea. Satish, can you add to that? I think you have a lot of expertise in that. Satish?
Don, this is Pam Smith. May I add to that?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You know, since black spot races differ depending upon the area you're in, I would really advise you to see if there are any local rose trials in your area. I know that ARTS, American Rose Trials for Sustainability, and AGRS, the American Garden Rose Selections, both are trialing for disease resistance. So, and they both award based on regionality. So I might encourage you to check out those resources.
And those are published in the American Rose magazine, which hopefully you're seeing as you're a member of the American Rose Society. If you're not, you should join and you'll see a promotion again a little later. Next question, please.
All right, Pamela wants to know, what is the LD50 rating of 7 and how long will it stay in the ground?
I'd refer you to the label, and if you don't have the material and you want to know that, go to greenbook.net and look up the material safety data sheet, and that will have the information on the LD50, and it will also tell you how long the material will linger in the targeted areas. And I won't answer the question directly because I don't have that information at my fingertips. That's something that there are resources, greenbook.net, and again, the National Pesticide Information Center both can give you that information.
All right, Melissa's a candidate for CR, wants to know, do you recommend a systemic fungicide?
Well, I will tell you, I would recommend that you talk to your local folks and see what's working there. I can tell you that we here in Omaha find that propiconazole is an extremely effective systemic fungicide, and you can buy that in our garden stores. Fertilome sells Fertilome liquid systemic fungicide that contains a homeowner dilution of propiconazole at an affordable price.
All right, Mark would like to know, why do you get more coverage from a gallon of product in Nebraska as opposed to California? Is it temperature related?
We don't get more coverage, we got smaller plants. I'm afraid you're hearing the telephone for a minute. There, my wife got it. Where in California you'll have a 6-foot plant, we'll have a 3-foot plant, so you get twice the coverage.
All right, Mark would like to know, is there a good resource for looking up modes of action for various pesticides?
Again, I refer you to greenbook.net and NPIC's website. They will tell you what the modes are, whether they're systemic or contact product, and there'll be information on translocation if it's a systemic, for example. But use those resources.
All right, Mary would like to ask, Bear Complete Rose Care ground pellets, better for bees?
Well, they won't get into the bloom. Their systemic material won't reach the bloom petals, so I guess so, but generally speaking, I avoid using an insecticide when at all possible. I prefer to use only in an area that's affected. So if I have aphids, for example, I'll go out and squish them or wash them off. If I have spider mites, I'll use a powerful blast from my hose on the underneath side of the leaves. If I have Japanese beetles, I'll pick them off. If I have cane borers, I'll cut the affected canes if I feel that's damaging. So I don't like using a systemic insecticide. I prefer to just spray the targeted pest only when they're present. I hope that answered it.
Jamina, how good is Bear Systemic for roses? Would you recommend it?
What's systemic?
systemic? Bear.
Bear, I understand from folks that it's effective. I don't use Bear. I use the other product. I generally buy the generic products at my local turf store. They carry the products I use, and so I tend towards that instead of the brand name, and I pay a little less for it. I have a pesticide license in the state, so I don't buy restricted chemicals, but I do buy chemicals that are less dilute than the ones you get in your garden stores, so I have more product for the same money. Bear, I understand, is good, but I have no experience with it.
All right. Alina would like to know, what is your opinion on millstop or potassium bicarbonate for fungal disease?
In other words, a baking soda and that kind of thing, that's what we're getting at, Gary?
Yeah.
Satish, have you ever tried any of those? I never have.
No, because it's primarily more effective in powdery mildew rather than black spot. And I understand from friends who use it, it works very well for that purpose.
There you go.
All right.
Don,
Jeannie would like, go ahead.
Don, this is Andy Black. I have used the millstop or a variation of it. Millstop is potassium bicarbonate, whereas baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. They prefer the potassium bicarbonate since it will not add sodium when it drips off into the soil. And my personal use of it is it can be effective, but it washes off so easily that you literally have to reapply it after a heavy dew.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Jeannie would like to ask, can you use companion planting to deter pest and disease?
Yep. In some cases, my wife decided that marigolds in my roses would help. She read it somewhere they would help keep some insects away, and we planted them last year, and I didn't see a lot of difference. I know people do that. Anytime you have companion plantings in your rose garden, you're going to have other flowers that will attract the insect to it. And so you may not see as much damage. If you have a perennial garden nearby, it may attract them away from your roses. I grow my roses in rose beds for ease of care because I grow them for cut flowers. A lot of people claim they have success with companion plantings. I've not seen any research that says that that's an effective method.
All right, moving on. Hank would like to ask, what are two good systemic insecticides and two fungicides? And so can you rotate them?
Yes, you can rotate them. I'll answer that part first. Again, for contact, I use Manzate, and for the systemic fungicide, I use the propiconazole, and I pretty much stick with those two materials. I would suggest that you check with your local Consulting Rosarian for effective materials. I know that there's other azoles out there in addition to propiconazole that are systemics that are similar in mode of action. And the problem is they still have that single site mode of action. So I don't know that you gain anything by going to something other than one contact and one systemic and rotating them.
All right, Pamela would like to ask, how early do you apply, or how do you apply an application for black spot? or how early, sorry?
As it starts leafing out. And then depending on what material, every 7 or 14 days. So I prune in early to mid-April, and as soon as they start leafing out, I start spraying for fungus.
Right. Sylvia would like to ask, do you have an opinion on using wood glue on cut cane surfaces to dissuade cane borers?
Yep, I got an opinion. Everybody's got an opinion on that. I used to do it all the time, and I used Elmer's glue, the white glue, not the school glue, not the carpenter glue, but just cheap old Elmer's glue on the end of cut canes. And I did that religiously for many years. And then I got tired of doing that, so I quit doing that. I have cane borers. I've not seen any serious damage to the roses. I'll occasionally find one that bores down a ways. If the leaves are looking a little wilted, I'll cut below the cane borer and dispose of that part of the cane. So it works. If you have the patience to do it, by all means do it.
All right, Lauren is a candidate. She would like to ask, rose midge has been in her garden the last 2 years. It has been suggested by a local Rosarian in Kansas City to use an insecticidal soil drench in May. What drench would you recommend?
Haven't done it. I do know there are drench materials that they use. I believe spinosad is one of them, and that's natural material derived. Satish, any help?
I agree with that. Spinosad is much less toxic to bees than anything else you may want to use.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, the question, I have bare rose food that has fungicide in the food. I've had bad fungus in my roses. What is a better quality of rose food that has a fungicide systemically?
Spray. One word answer. That was it, Gary. Spray it. Don't rely on a rose food with fungus. Use a preventive spray.
Let's go down. We've got a holy.
Running out of questions?
Yeah, we're running out of questions. I've got people behind us answering.
Uh-huh.
All right. Jeez, we may be done here. All the other questions seem to have been answered.
Good, good. I want to be sure and thank those folks that have been answering questions. Satish and Pam and Andy and Ken, thank you for your help.
There's actually a question for a CR candidate. What non-toxic spray stickers do you recommend? And that was from Alan Davis.
Non-toxic spray for what?
What non-toxic spray stickers do you recommend?
A sticker. I don't use a sticker. I know that generally most of the products will say that they already have a sticker in them on most modern liquid chemical sprays. If you're using a powder spray, it might be effective. I know, excuse me, let me get a drink of water. I know a lot of people do use adjuvants to spread and stick. And I don't use it, so I can't make a recommendation.
All right, Karen would like to know, in Ohio, all roses are attacked by prickly rose slugs, especially after a rainy season. Will
Yeah.
Spindicide help with this?
For bristly rose slug, we get it every spring in Omaha. You will generally find that you need to go through your garden on a regular basis, and you will see the symptoms early on. You'll start seeing that damage to the leaves. When you find it, the easiest thing to do is turn over the leaves in the vicinity of that damage and squish them. And you'll get, again, that nice satisfying green goo on your hands that tells you you actually got rid of them. Bristly rose slugs are so small that they often, you think they're a vein of the rose leaf. If I got damage in a larger area, I will take an insecticide and a contact insecticide and spray the underneath leaf in that area, but only in that area. I only spray in the damaged area if I spray at all.
Well, Pam Smith answered that, but I'll go ahead and pull it up, ask you anyway. Barry, a candidate, asked, during the presentation, you mentioned that we should water the day before using insecticide by water. Do you mean spraying water onto the leaves, or can a drip watering suffice?
Water your garden. Drip would certainly work. The idea is to get the plant hydrated, to make sure the leaves have water in them and aren't susceptible to spray burn. If you're using a drip irrigation system, turn it on the day before and use it. If you're like me, I use just a little spray outlets just above the surface of the soil, and I'll water the day before. Now, obviously, if it's raining the day before or the same day, that's fine too.
Casimir would like to ask, would you recommend fungicide infuse?
Fungicide what?
Infuse.
INFUSE?
Yes.
I have no idea what that would be. Is that a brand name?
Do not know.
Yeah, I've never heard of that brand name or that method of use.
Okay, let's see what else we have. All right, this is a nice long one. Don, a candidate, has asked, I have found that Kiss Me Over the Garden Gate is a great sacrificial plant for Japanese beetles. The Japanese JBs refer to the Kiss Me, plus they're tall and make it easy to pick off the Japanese beetles. I feed them to my chickens.
I love that. I do know that barrier plants will stop some of the Japanese beetles from entering your garden. A tall fence can help discourage them from coming in too. You know, they'll tend to stay on that side. Unfortunately, with roses, that seems to draw them all. In my neighborhood, nobody else got roses, but and I've used milky spore, and hopefully it's effective in my yard, but the next door neighbor has not, so I get all their Japanese beetles. I've thought at times about putting traps down a block or so away, but it's too expensive, so I'll continue picking them off.
All right, Tony asks, how often are you spraying for black
Hi,
spot?
Don.
For black spot, I spray weekly.
Hi, Don.
Yeah.
I looked up the infused fungicide. It's made by Bonide, and the active ingredients is propiconazole itself, 1.55%. So you'll have to use a lot more of it to make equivalent of propiconazole, 14.5%. And if you do that, it should work fine. But why would you buy it?
Yeah, I use the commercial 14.3% and find that's cost effective. If you have a large garden, you certainly would want to use the 14.3. So yeah, if it's got propiconazole as its ingredient, yeah, it'll work.
All right, Lay wants to know the best spray for thrips.
Best spray for thrips. I can't tell you what the best spray is. The one that works for me is Talstar, which, let me see, has bifenthrin in it, which is a pyrethroid. And I miss the blooms with that small spray, trigger operated spray bloom I was talking about. I've only got 150 roses, so for me, that's doable. If you've got a large garden, you may need to miss the blooms with a pump-up sprayer.
All right, Jill says she lives in North Georgia where it rains frequently, and we have lots of dew and humidity too. How much dew or moisture can be used on rose foliage and still have fungicide sprays be effective?
When you spray, I generally like the leaves, for my purposes, to be dry, although on occasion there has been some dew, and it seems to be effective if it's just a very little. I assume the problem she's having is finding a time when the leaf is dry to spray it, and late evening might be the best time for her.
Oh, that was a comment, sorry.
Gary is scrolling down through the questions, folks.
Many of them have been answered.
That's a good thing. I guess while you're looking, I do want to make 2 points and drill them into your head again, and that is read the label and wear the PPE. I know sometimes it's hot and you'll say, I'm going to wear a short sleeve shirt and shorts. Don't do it. Wear the PPE, wear the eye protection, wear the nitrile gloves. Don't take chances.
Don, we do have a candidate question from Ann Coleman. She says, if you squish Japanese beetles, will you release pheromones?
You know, I understand. I've heard that you do. I don't squish them. Baldo does. Baldo squishes them. But I drown them in soapy water, so I don't have that problem. Now, cucumber beetles, I do squish, but I also drown them as well. So it depends how many there are.
David asked, could you please elaborate on the spraying for thrips that was mentioned, like the techniques, what he's after?
I use Talstar, Talstar. It's a emulsifiable concentrate that a milky substance that you have to mix into your water. I spray with a small trigger spray bottle and mist that product on the blooms, but you have to do it every day or two because the bloom continues to open, exposing more bloom to the thrip. And you also need to spray it before the bloom starts opening to catch it before they start getting in. They'll get in right away. And I've had thrip problems, but misting has relieved that problem for the most part.
Well, we're about at the end of this anyway. I think Kim or John, you had something you wanted to mention before it closes?
Yes, I just want to remind everyone, if you wanted to watch the first 3 weeks worth of videos, they're under resources, under Consulting Rosarian. You can view them there. If you are a CR, we will also be posting the link up here very soon for this webinar as well. Thank y'all for coming to join us today.
John, there was a question, somebody wanted to know how they can get CR credit for the presentation.
If
you-
they,
go ahead.
Go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sir, you answer. That's fine.
All right. By being on the list of attendees, that list will go to the national CR chairs, who in turn will send it to the district CR chairs, and you will get credit for that. So by the mere fact of your attendance, your name has been submitted. Okay, we good, John?
I think we're good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you didn't get a question answered through there, I hope everybody did. We will try to get back to you on answering those questions that were in the chat pod. Anything else you'd like to say, Kim?
No, just thank everyone for attending.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. See y'all at the Rose shows.
And remember, if you are a CR candidate on March 1st, you will receive an email from Carol at rose.org with the link, and you'll be able to take it on the 2nd and the 3rd. Have a great weekend.